Hello, and welcome to this episode of To the Point. I'm Neil Stanley, and I am looking forward to introducing you to Todd Taylor of Taylor Advisors. Let's get started. Well, Todd, it is great to be with you here today. I want to introduce you to our audience. And so for all of you who have been participating in To the Point, I have Todd Taylor, who is the managing partner and founder of Taylor Advisors. He is the president of Hub Taylor Advisors, a certified public accountant, a chartered financial analyst, and Todd has spoken at numerous state and national conferences, some of which I've had the privilege of participating in, being in the audience. He speaks about balance sheet management, bank investments, risk management, including the AICPA National Conference on Banking and Credit Unions. He has written numerous educational articles for banking publications on capital, liquidity, investments, and more. Todd, it's a pleasure to have you here today and to introduce you to our client base and prospects. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me, Neil. Appreciate it.
So, Taylor Advisors, you've got a lot going on, and I'm really curious as you think about this environment, why is this environment causing so many challenges for the banks today?
Yeah, Neil, excellent question. I mean, we could go a lot. I think first and foremost are the earnings challenges, right? But if you step back and you go back to the midst of COVID, right? I call it the COVID compression, right? And when you think about earnings, it wasn't quite as painful. Why? Well, back in the 2020 and 2021, as the Fed funds rate got cut significantly, banks felt margin compression, but it wasn't quite as painful as what we're experiencing today. And why is that, right? Well, as rates came down, you had what happened to banks' balance sheet. You had asset sensitive balance sheet, loan demand came to a screeching halt. You had loans prepay, cost of staying in cash was expensive and slow to get relief on the funding side. But margins held up. Why? Or profitability? Well, you had PPP fee recognition, which was great, and secondary mortgage activity was going gangbusters, right? And don't forget, during that period, what do we saw? Balance sheets grew. So when margin compressed, there was more earning assets, right? So what's different today? Well, a couple things. One is that we see this inverted yield curve, right? And we have to be mindful of why that is more painful right now. Because if we remember, and you know about your products, right? Funding is on the shorter end of the curve. And then a lot of the loans and investments are on the intermediate part of the curve. So that inversion has caused a lot of pain. Not to mention PPP fee recognition has run its course and secondary mortgage activity is dead. So we're not having that reoccurring revenue. This is so much more painful. I guess the bright news, Neil, is that we're seeing the yield curve de-invert as the 5 and 10-year treasury are up 75 to 100 basis points. Loan pricing is getting better and yields on investments for those that are investing are higher. So again, really front and center is earnings and margin management.
Great points. One of the things, as you know, I lead the idea exchange at Sheshnoff, and it strikes me so interestingly that we have bankers today, so they're focused in on non-interest income and non-interest expense, and they should be, I get that, but there's never a time that in my history where interest-bearing assets and liabilities have had more potential for progress and for challenge. And it seems to me that what you're doing with the balance sheet is so essential. What do you see as the top challenges for financial institutions as we go into 2024?
Yeah, great point. And I love the fact that you're mindful of that with your idea exchange. And just go back to this margin situation, right? For two things. One, your institutions, community banks, everyone's listening, are heavily net interest income dependent. That ratio is on average about 85%. So lots of reliance on that net interest income. Net interest margin in dollars is almost like net interest income. But one thing we have to be careful of is that each bank that's tuning in today is very unique. Different markets, different size balance sheet, complexity, loan makeup. So we have to be very unique. But I think two common things that I really see are a big challenge is this acceleration of funding costs. I know you work with your clients with that all the time. You couldn't be more timely. But let's be mindful of that. Everybody thinks that, oh my gosh, could the pain be over? And really not. Let me give you a little bit of history right now. So at the end of the second quarter, the average funding cost for community banks is right under 2%. Well, if you go back to the last rate cycle, Neil, it was 2004 and 2006, where the Fed funds rate was around 5.5%. I just shared with you that cost of funds today, and if we have a higher for longer and we're at 2%, do you know where the cost of funds peaked during that 2004, 2006 time period? It was in the low threes. So
Mm.
even if we have a pause in the Fed funds rate, which everyone's talking about, we're going to continue to see this lag effect and acceleration of funding costs. We have to do a lot of hard work to control that.
Mm.
Number two is loan pricing. My gosh, there's so many more considerations today when you're thinking about loan pricing, right? Now that we're so much higher, a lot of our bank clients we're talking about is that transactional loans. You have to have a relationship. They want to reserve the liquidity for those great customers. Number two, pledgeability of the loans, right? If you have a loan that's not eligible to be pledged for FHLB or another source, you need to adjust pricing. You need to get paid more for that. Now,
Yeah.
all banks are good at pricing for credit. But the other thing that's very valuable that people need to be reminded of when we do kind of our ALCO facilitation is the value of a prepayment penalty, right?
Yes.
We need to prepare for rates down when rates are higher. And if you're not able to garner or get a prepayment penalty, wouldn't it make sense that you have to be compensated in terms of some higher rate? So I'm just saying is that it's
Yeah.
very market specific. It's not about competition. Those are two big things that I think are getting a lot of attention to really trying to figure out ways to protect or improve the margin.
Very interesting insights. One thing that came out, and I'm sure you're all over this in a recent meeting, was that somebody said, any past due loan that's priced at 4 or 4.5%, you would be derelict if you're not charging the past due interest rate on it, if you're not accelerating that rate according to the terms, because the old days of being gentle and kind and go, oh no, we don't want to charge them the default rate. Uh, Keep in mind that should be repriced, let alone if it's in
Sure.
default. It should be repriced for sure. So great insights, Todd, on that. So
Sure.
what do you see as you think about not only the performance of the banks, but the regulatory environment? What do you think the primary focus is going to be for examinations as we go into the next year?
Oh, Neil, that's very, very valuable. I want to tell you a short story that we wrote it, had a presentation called The Evolution of ALCO for Regulatory Requirements. If you go back to the 1970s, the expectation was just a plain and simple gap report, right? There wasn't much complexity. But let's be mindful over the periods from the 70s to today, there's been a lot of stresses in the financial system, right? The dot
Hmm.
com, the thrift, the thrift challenges that we had. And what about the subprime debacle, COVID? All of those, think about that. Pain promotes change and higher expectations regarding the different parts of a regulatory exam. So when you bring it front and center post COVID right now, the top focus is probably liquidity management, right? Now, back in the day, you think about Silicon Valley Bank, an unbelievable, whoever thought that we would actually experience another run on the bank, right? And some fundamental things got flawed. Just because you have good on balance sheet liquidity does not give you a pass with the regulators. So at Taylor Advisors, we've been spending a lot of time on recalibrating some of kind of our liquidity tools, the templates, right? Lots of
Yeah.
revisions, right? So maybe something that I think might be beneficial for the group is that utilization of wholesale funding is being tapped, right? Community banks that never used it before. But we have to be mindful of there's secured borrowings, unsecured borrowings, right? And even we have to be mindful of uninsured deposits, right? How maybe could we use reciprocals and other products to free up the liquidity? One thing, Neil, that I think that we learned, and we facilitate over 400 ALCOs a year, but we created something fairly new. It was called the cash conversion timeline. And fairly simple, but I think that's where some of the fundamentals are get lost, right? how do you know what liquidity is available day one? Day two might be selling securities. To garner not national market deposits or brokers might take a little time. We really have to go through this kind of chronological order of how you can convert. So really, number one, I think liquidity. Now, I don't want to ignore interest rate risk with assumption changes and
Right.
really capital stress testing, especially we go through a downturn. Really, all aspects of kind of a safety and soundness exams are going to be heightened, but liquidity is really kind of front and center.
So good. So one of my little phrases I like, Todd, is all of us are smarter than any of us. And when I think about being in bank ALCO meetings over the years, I'm thinking to myself, if we had an advisor who had participated in 400 meetings, the knowledge that you're gaining and how you bring it to your clients, I mean, you can have the best and brightest, but if you're only seeing a limited amount of activity, you don't know what's going on. Where you're in touch with all these ALCOs and all these regulatory environments and examinations, I think the service you're providing makes so much sense for the banks today. So thank you for that. So
Sure,
do
Neil.
you have any specific advice for an ALCO committee today?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, on your last comment, right, I think one value that we think about in any other third party or independent third party is I like to use the word perspective, right? Understanding what's going on in different markets. So I appreciate you sharing that. But I guess what I would like to share with the group is a couple of things. There's a high correlation between highly effective ALCO and balance sheet management and higher stable margins over time, right? And one thing that I think as we've talked with banks over the past couple of years, today more than ever, we have to recalibrate and reimagine our ALCO. And why is that? Our balance sheet is very different. The rate climate's different and the challenges are different. The time that we spend has to be very important. Your ALCO meeting might be one of the most expensive and important meetings because one of the strategies that come out of that meeting, and number two, the timing, the time that it takes for the executive management team, right? So I like to say, hey, make sure you properly allocate your time. The other thing that I think was always good is that I like to think about the different dimensions of time. Think about your ALCO packet. Think about what's covered. Where are you having your conversations? We got to study the past with peer data, right? Where have we been? Monitor the present. Where is loan demand? Where's our borrowing cost, right? But the big one as we go into 2024 is preparing for the future. We all know that we get together for these meetings. It's not just about running reports. You have to ask yourself and your institution, which a lot of people tune in, what's the value of a basis point, right? If you're a $200 million in earning assets, every basis point's pre-tax is $20,000. So how can we find that through strategies, right? So strategies on loans, funding, be careful out there. There's a lot of strategies that are being pitched by vendors that are kind of laced with kind of commissions, right? Do you do a sales leaseback? Do you do a derivative? Do you sell bonds? Do you sell mortgage servicing rights? Be careful. Sometimes they really make a lot of sense, but some of them could cost the bank. So really happy that people are revisiting what's important to the ALCO meeting. Really great opportunities to avoid landmines, but also capitalize on opportunities.
Well, Todd, this has been great. I hope that the audience has picked up on the dimensions that you're able to address. Tell us a little bit about your team. How many advisors do you have in part of your organization?
Yeah, just real quickly. Yep, our firm is 15 people, but we have 7 consultants. We're very intentional about the skill set. Former regulators, former senior managers at accounting firms, capital market specialists, CFOs at banks. We get together very frequently to weigh in on our clients and kind of identifying challenges and what's working. So we understand every market's unique, but again, we feel that this, as we bring perspective along the way, we're able to kind of really weigh in on every part of that balance sheet, from capital to liquidity to interest rate risk to even investments. And so we've enjoyed really working and helping clients, and been very gratifying. I know this is a challenging time, but it really will create opportunities to make sure that everyone can do the best job we have. One thing that people have shared with us, he goes, what's nice is that we can rent some time, right? We're like a part-time ALM manager or treasurer. So again, we know there's a big demand for our service, but we've enjoyed working with community banks.
Excellent. Well, Todd, you covered a lot of bases with us today. Is there anything else you'd like to share?
No, I just want to say I want to thank CorePoint and Neil for letting us get a chance to touch base. I think we will, at the end of this tape, you should get a link. We're going to be able to provide a couple of articles, reprioritizing the margin, which was picked up by the Tennessee bankers. Another one called Balance Sheet Blind Spots. I just think this content will be valuable to share with your team. So please take advantage through the link to take a look at a couple of our articles.
Todd, thank you. This has been really good. I've seen you present many times, but every time I pick up something new, I pick up a lot of great energy. Folks, I think if you have been working with Todd, great, you're in good hands, I'm sure. But if you haven't ever talked to him or his team, I would really encourage you to give them a call. We will have it in the YouTube. There'll be a link to their website and contact information to reach out to Todd. So thank you all for attending this episode. We look forward to presenting to you on the next episode of To the Point. Thank you so much.
Thank you.